Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. This is Voice of Your Passions business interview live. I'm Stephanie Bonte-Lebair. I'm the founder and creator of Empowered Business Networking, and I'm super excited to be here with my friend and colleague, Mary Chan, who is also a voice coach just like me, but we have completely different businesses because we take it from a different angle. I'm going to read just a little bit of Mary's bio and then welcome her on. So she was born and raised in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, to immigrant parents. Mary Chan was told to stay quiet even when she was laughing and not ruffle any feathers. She wasn't allowed to have a voice and crave for someone to speak to. Today, Mary gives women self-confidence with their voice because she felt that she didn't have one growing up. Mary Chan is a podcast strategist, voice coach, and voiceover artist who believes in empowering women to find their voice. After working in radio for 20 years, she struck out on her own and founded Organized Sound Productions, a podcast production and consulting company. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, it's so good to be here with you.
Yes, I'm so excited to have someone who also values the voice and values the singing background and then taking that into business and creating it, creating your own take on how to use your voice in the world. I always like to say, I help people love the sound of their voice, right? And so you have a similar angle, like find your voice. So tell me more about like the passion behind your business. What makes you very passionate about what you do?
Yeah, like in your introduction, when I was a little girl, my dad being a traditional Chinese man, he was and me being the youngest of three kids, I was always told to shut up, literally, and then I defied my parents and didn't go into the medical field to become a doctor or an accountant. I went to radio school. And when I did that, I realized, oh my gosh, I can use my voice. I'm allowed to use my voice. And it created such a difference in my life. And then when I got into my radio career, helping other women just um, empower themselves and know that, when they read their commercial for their radio 30-second commercial, that they can do this, that they can still sound like themselves and not have to put on some radio voice or something like that, that you can still truly be who you are when you are speaking.
I love it. Sometimes people say, sometimes I speak with my opera voice.
Yeah.
Right. And I had the same sort of situation with my parents. They questioned. I went to college for a music, not even education. I went for performance. And they're like, how are
Ah,
you going to make a living?
exactly.
There's
How are
so
you going to
much
make money?
judgment. Yeah.
Mm.
There's judgment around us finding our voice in an artistic way, whether it's radio or music or whatever that looks like. So, oh my gosh, I so resonate with where you're coming from. So tell me more about the transformation you provide for helping people find their voice and use it powerfully.
Well, it all started with my evolution from a radio into podcasting. So in 2018, I was downsized, corporate radio career. I no longer was allowed to make commercials and voice them. And our entire creative department, we lost our jobs. And so, you kind of sulk around and you cry for a little while. What do I do with my life? I'd worked in that same building for 15 years. So radio was all I knew. And then I realized, I listened to a lot of podcasts. I like them. I can hear there's things that can be improved because of my radio background. And so I decided that's how I was going to build a business and create some income for my family. And basically through that, I realized all the things that I had learned in radio translated so well into podcasting, like the going from a lot of people coming to me with the overwhelm of how do I start a podcast or how do I maintain my show every single week or whatever your release schedule is, or how do I become a guest on a podcast. Those same things that I learned in radio, I break down into bite-sized little tasks and chunks for you to do one at a time and focus on so that you don't have that overwhelm on how to start a podcast or become a guest or anything to do with podcasting.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And it's so important to use your voice in your marketing, right? Like the power
Mm.
of your physical voice has more reach. Like when someone listens to this interview or they listen to a podcast, you're going to have a more of a connection with that listener than if they're just reading your, verbal written language in your marketing. So I think there is already like there's a desire out there to be more seen and more heard. And we can get a little bit overwhelmed about where to start. Like, how do you even get started? And how can you add one more thing to your plate? That's what I always think to
Yeah.
myself is I have to add one more thing to my plate. What is it going to be? And for me, it was like the version of a podcast or these interview series and being able to do Facebook Lives. So what do you say to someone who's like, oh my gosh, this feels way too overwhelming? Like, how do they get started?
You get started just by figuring out what your own passion is first. We're talking about passions at the beginning of this. Like, what is it that you want to tell? The message that you have, the stories, because a podcast is about storytelling, which is a much better relationship builder and impact for your business than something like statistics. Nobody talks about statistics. You don't go to a friend's house or a dinner party and say, oh yeah, did you know that 1 in 5 people blah blah, like that's not exciting. We are here to tell stories and make that connection. So figuring out what that passion is and what it is that you will be able to talk about day in and day out and not get bored of, that's the first step in figuring out what you want to talk about on your podcast.
Oh my gosh, I think we could have a much longer interview than 15 minutes today, but we will keep it into the time frame. So, can you give us an example of someone you've helped, you've coached with a podcast, a success story of any kind?
Yeah, a podcast success really isn't like download numbers, how many downloads you get and listeners and followers and all of that stuff. My version of podcast success is whatever you would like it to be. So, one of the things that I hear time and again from some of my clients is they realize their podcast is a success when they're out in the real world, say at a conference or they're networking somewhere, and people recognize their voice. You could be at the
Oh.
other end of the hallway talking to someone, and then someone runs up to you and kind of like pokes you on the shoulder. And like, are you so and so from the, XYZ podcast? And you're like, what? How did you know that? Well, I recognize your voice
Oh,
because
I
they
love
are
it.
a fan. So to me, that is the success.
That's so great. It is brand recognition, right? It's another
Mhm.
way to have brand recognition. And these days, we're being so virtually condensed, like we're online all the time. We're trying to be seen and heard in this virtual environment. And so every tool in your tool belt is going to help you in some way. So, um, yeah, I just see the value here. So can you give any tips? Like, what's your biggest tip to help somebody who wants to use their voice or find their voice and start using it more effectively in their marketing?
Be silly. Really. It helps if you have a kid. Here's the tip. If you have a kid, go and find a kid's book. Even if you don't have a kid, go to the library or something. Go get a kid's book because there's a lot of good rhymes and rhythm and cadence. And then just start reading the book out loud to yourself. Especially if you want to just start out, be in the bedroom by yourself and read it in a kid's voice, and then read it in a ogre voice. Some people like to try and do it in a Gollum voice from Lord of the Rings, and it's just figuring out what your range is, and knowing that it's not about he's speaking way up here or speaking way down here. It's being able to flow from highs and lows and getting that melody in your voice. Because when you're speaking, as you would know, speaking has all the melodies and pitch just like singing does. So you want to be able to convey that passion and energy in your voice even when you're speaking. Otherwise, you're going to sound monotone, flat, and people will not be excited about what you're trying to say.
Oh, it's so true. And I always bring this back to if you were singing a song and you only had one note for the entire song, and your whole song was on one note, and you had to sing the entire song on one note, and pretty soon the audience would get totally bored of you.
Yes, exactly. It's the same thing. One
Yeah.
note, you're flat. People don't care after a while because you're the same
No.
throughout.
So you have to have what is called vocal variety, right? Like it's
Mhm.
the total variety of the voice. And I always love to read a cat in the hat story to create vocal variety.
Yes.
So the fact that you said get a children's book, I'm like, yes, the cat in the hat, get it out, start reading it. I love that. So we're so on the same page. We're going to have so much fun together. I'm excited because we're going to be in a cohort first quarter this year. So we're going to have some fun. All right. So tell us, you have a gift for everybody today. So tell us what that is.
So going back to we were saying passion and knowing what that is. But aside knowing what you want to talk about, you have to know what your listener wants. So who is this listener? It can be someone who is your business avatar, your ideal client. It can be very similar to your ideal listener. So that's something that you need to know. And to help you figure that out, I have a workbook that you can download called Identify Your Ideal Listener. And it will help you figure out who that is and how to connect emotionally with them.
I love it. So to get this free workbook, you just have to enter hashtag podcast into the comments of this video, and Mary's going to reach out directly to you with the link so you can download that and have that free gift. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. It's actually a great idea. Even if you don't want to have your own podcast, it still can be a great exercise, I think, because your listener is your listener no matter where you go. So if you're at a networking event, you have the listener who is going to be interested in what are your services, what are your products and services, right? So anytime you can get clear on an avatar, that's a great exercise. So I highly recommend you do that, get to know Mary, and you know, take the next step to being able to really speak to the right people in your audience, right? We are voice people, so we're all about the power of the message and the power and the impact of the sound that you have that is unique to you. Your voice is like a fingerprint.
Yes.
So definitely take your fingerprint and make sure more people recognize you and they hear you across the room and they're like, that's Stephanie, that's Mary. Sometimes just break out into song in the middle of things, but that's, that's my kind of my goofy thing at times. And sometimes it's just my fun thing. So
yeah,
I love it. So thank you, Mary, so much for this quick, focused interview. I think what you do is amazing. We're going to have some fun together. If you are listening to this interview and you want to meet more awesome people like Mary, or you just want to meet Mary again, come visit us. We have an event the first Thursday of every month that is open to guests. You just go to ebnnetworking.com and click on the link and come join us. And we have a ton of service-based professionals. We have speakers, coaches, trainers, service-based industries like financial services, health and wellness. Come join us, network with us, see who we can introduce to you to take the next step in your business journey. Thank you so much. I'll see you all soon. Bye.